Nir, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Good to have you. So, you are a wizard of habit forming technology. You also teach people, on the other hand, how to mitigate the effects of this habit forming technology. How did you end up on both sides of the fence?
Different products. So we can have good habits around the technology that helps us get to the gym or helps us form a habit around learning a new language, helps us be more productive at work, helps us connect with our family. And we can also break the bad habits that we don't want with technology. So different products is the easy answer.
You've said that, this is a quote from you, you said that we are slaves to the urgent at the expense of the important. Slaves to the urgent at the expense of the important. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think what we see happening today is that many people struggle with the fact that day after day they run real fast in the wrong direction. That they don't understand distraction. And if you ask most people, uh, do they know what the word means? What is distraction? They'll say, "Oh yeah, I totally." It's one of those words everybody thinks they understand, but then when you really press them on it to see if they really understand what the word means, you get a response similar to what I thought, which was that I didn't really get the word. And the best way to understand if you know what distraction is to ask yourself whether you know what distraction is not. Do you know the opposite of distraction? Most people will tell you the antonym of distraction is focus, but that's not exactly right. The opposite of distraction is not focus. The opposite of distraction, if you look at the origin of the word, is traction. That both traction and distraction come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull. And you'll notice they both end in the same six letters, ACTION, that spells action. So traction, by definition, is any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do, things you do with intent, things that help move you closer to your values and help you become the kind of person you want to become. The opposite of traction is distraction. Distraction is any action that pulls you farther away from what you plan to do, further away from your goals, further away from becoming the kind of person you want to become. So, this is really important. This isn't just semantics. This makes a big difference. And here's why: because any action can be traction or distraction. Let me give you an example. For years, I would go to my desk at work, I'd sit down, I'd look at my to do list, and I'd say, okay, I see there's that big project that I need to work on that I've been procrastinating on. I'm not going to delay anymore. I'm going to get started right now, right here. Here I go. I'm going to get started. But first, let me just check some email, right? Let me just do a couple of those other things on my to do list, the easy stuff, real quick. Let me get that out of the way first. Let me just check that Slack channel. Why? Because that's work stuff, right? Checking email, that's a work related task. It's okay, right? I'm still being productive, right? Wrong. Anything that is not what you plan to do with your time is by definition a distraction. And those types of tasks, the kind of tasks that trick you into prioritizing the urgent at the expense of the important, is the most pernicious form of distraction because you don't even realize you're distracted until the end of the day rolls around and you say to yourself, wait, what did I do all day? I still didn't do that big project that I said I was going to do. Another day goes by and I didn't make my sales calls. I didn't work on that blog post. I didn't work on that big project that I keep delaying on because I got distracted, even though I was busy all day. What happened? So anything can be a distraction, even the work stuff, because distraction tricks us into prioritizing the urgent at the expense of the important. We do the easy stuff, the urgent stuff, when what we really need to do is the hard work that moves us forward in life. Sometimes the stuff that's not always urgent, but is just as important to move us forward in life. So anything can become a distraction. Conversely, anything can be traction. So I am not one of these chicken little tech critics that you hear today saying technology is melting your brain. Stop using social media accounts. One of these professors who's never been on social media telling you from their ivory tower, stop using email. Give me a break. Are you serious? People will get fired if they stop using these technologies. Very easy for you to say when you don't need them for your job. But many of us rely on these technologies. We can't tell people stop using technology. What kind of stupid advice is that? What we need to do is to realize that these technologies are great, right? Social media is not hijacking your brain. This is ridiculous. We can use these tools. And frankly, we need to stop medicalizing and moralizing the use of technology and realize that these things are just tools. You want to play video games? Great. You want to go on social media? Awesome. You want to watch videos on YouTube? Do it, but do it with intent. Use the product. Don't let the product use you by deciding in advance how you will use those products. Use them on your schedule, not anybody else's. And so anything can be traction or distraction based on one word, and that one word is intent.
I don't feel we're prepared for that. Like I feel like social media has come. I'm 45, and social media. I saw the evolution of social media in my life, and I am not prepared. Was not equipped. I feel like I am equipped now because this is what I do. I'm a personal performance coach, and I help people, use these philosophies to be intentional about how they spend their time. And I'm constantly coaching with around productivity and consistency, et cetera. But I don't feel like we're prepared, right? I don't feel like the world in general is prepared. And so people don't use these technologies with intent. They use them by default. They're bored for a split second. I'm saying me too, right? I'm still in this boat and I still fight these battles. I have guardrails and I have strategies and tactics that I use, but I generally think that people aren't prepared for this. Do you agree, or what are your thoughts on that?
Hello, ring ring. This is your wake up call. I wrote this book. It took me 5 years. I researched every bit of science around focus and distraction. The answer is right there. All you got to do is read the book. And I promise you, if you spend an hour and a half with my book and you read through this 5 years of research, I promise you, unless you have a pathology, unless you have some kind of disorder, you will become indistractable. And if you don't become indistractable, if you don't do something about this problem and just complain about it, you will be part of this bifurcation that we see happening today between people who let their time and attention be controlled by others and people who stand up and say, no more. I will control my time. I will control my attention. I will become indistractable. This is the skill of the century. If you think the world is distracting now, just wait a few years. This is not going backwards, people. How many times can we complain about social media this and Twitter that and the news this and the modern world and so stressful, so distracting? Do something. It's in the book. So this is exactly the wake-up call for folks is instead of just complaining about it, saying, oh, look, our kids keep playing video games. Meanwhile, we all sit around the table and let our kids play video games at the table, right? We say, oh, we just don't get enough done at work. We just can't keep up. But are we doing something about it or do we complain? And so the thing is, if you hold your breath, you are going to suffocate. The government is not going to fix this. The social media companies are not going to fix this. They are in business to turn your time and attention into money. That is what they do for a living. I know how they get you hooked. I wrote the book Hooked, and I can tell you all their tricks. No doubt about it. They are monetizing your eyeballs. And guess what? It's not just the social media companies, it's traditional media companies. Fox News, CNN, New York Times, they're all in the same business model. They don't care how much content you've consumed. Netflix could care less if you spend all day watching television shows. They're not going to tell you you've had enough. Just like your local baker is not going to tell you, hey, stop eating so many croissants, right? It's not their job. The local baker's job is to make delicious treats. These media companies' job is to make good products. We want them to do this. We want these social media products to be engaging. What are we going to tell? Hey, Apple, your phones are way too user friendly. Can you please make them harder to use? Hey, Netflix, your shows, they're really good. I want to watch them. Please stop that. It's not going to happen, folks. We have to do something about this right now by ourselves because nobody's going to fix this for us. And so if you want a competitive advantage over everybody else in your industry, over everyone else in your world, get this skill. Learn how to be indistractable because there is no area of your life, whether it's your physical health, your mental health, your relationships, everything requires you to be able to control your attention. This is fundamentally how we choose the life we want to live.
And really, this isn't new, right? This has been going on, since the advent of radio, television.
Yeah, keep going all the way back to Aristotle, right? Literally, Aristotle talked about how the written word, this terrible new technology of writing things down, was going to, quote, enfeeble men's minds. Plato talked about akrasia, the tendency that we have to do things against our better interest. People have been struggling with distraction since time immemorial, right? Plato said this 2,500 years before the internet. People think it's the internet that gets them distracted. It is the latest way to deflect responsibility for doing something about this problem.
If you're listening to this interview right now, own it. I mean, own it. Like if you know that your distraction is causing you pain or problems or lack of productivity, lack of consistency, lack of being who you want to be in the world, do something about it. I mean, the first thing you can do is buy the book and start there. But you've got to own this because, yeah, you're right, Nir. It's not getting any easier. They're not going to make things less interesting for us to be less hooked on these technologies.
Right. And it's not just with technology. No, I started the book thinking it was just about technology. And the more I got into it, I realized, wait a minute, not only is the problem not new, there's all kinds of distractions in the world, right? It's not just social media. It can be television. It can be work. You know, we talked about the difference between traction and distraction. We all know that person who spends way too much time in the office, and that's a distraction from being a part of their kids' lives or being a member of their community, having any friends, right? We know these people who exercise in the gym way too much, and they do it at the expense of everything else in their life. Anything can be a distraction. So my goal is not to tell people what to do with their time. I'm not here to tell you stop using the internet. That's ridiculous advice. I'm here to tell you whatever it is you want to do with your time, I'm going to help you do by helping you live your life according to your values and your schedule, not somebody else's.
Psychologists tell us that the only reason why we do something is to avoid pain. Is that why we do that quick check of email before we get into that big project, before we make those sales calls? Like, let me just check email real quick. You know what? Let me
Yeah.
just check the sports score. Are those pain avoidance strategies that we've created?
Yeah, so most psychologists don't tell you that. I tell you that. Most psychologists, most people believe if you ask them what's the nature of human motivation, people will tell you some version of what we call the pleasure principle, what Sigmund Freud called the pleasure principle. Jeremy Bentham said something very similar, which says that everything that humans do is about the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain, right? Carrots and sticks. We've all heard this before. Neurologically, we know that this is not true, that everything we do is not about the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain, but rather, neurologically speaking, everything we do for only one reason, and that is the desire to escape discomfort. Everything you do, even the pursuit of pleasurable sensations, is itself psychologically destabilizing. Wanting, craving, desire, lusting, all of these things, the way the brain gets us to do things is by making us feel uncomfortable enough to get our butt in motion to get us to do something. So once you realize this fact, you realize, therefore, if all human behavior is spurred by a desire to escape discomfort, that must mean, therefore, that time management necessitates pain management. Let me say that again. Time management necessitates pain management. So we talked earlier about we talked about traction and distraction, right? You can picture in your mind this, two arrows pointing to the left and to the right, traction and distraction. They're opposing forces. Now we have to ask ourselves, well, what puts us on the path to traction or distraction? We have two kinds of triggers. So you can think of two arrows pointing to the middle of this intersection between the left and right arrows pointing out to the right and to the left. These two arrows pointing up and down towards the center represent the internal triggers and the external triggers. So external triggers, this is what people tend to blame when it comes to talking about distraction. We blame the pings, the dings, the rings, anything in our outside environment that leads us towards traction or distraction. Turns out, however, that even though we blame these things outside of us, studies have found that is only 10% of the reason that you check your phone, the reason you get distracted, is because of any kind of notification or external trigger. 90% of the time, 90% of the time that you get distracted, 90% of the time you check your phone, you're not checking it because of a notification. Studies have found 90% of the time we check our devices because of an internal trigger. What is an internal trigger? An internal trigger is an uncomfortable emotional state that we seek to escape from. Boredom, loneliness, fatigue, uncertainty. These are uncomfortable feelings that we seek to escape. And so back to this point we talked about earlier, that all time management necessitates pain management. If you don't understand what is that discomfort, if you keep blaming the external triggers, the phone, the news, the world these days, as opposed to looking at what is the internal triggers, by realizing that most distraction, by and large, begins from within. So the first step to becoming indistractable is to master these internal triggers, because whether it's too much news, too much booze, too much football, too much Facebook, all of these overuse behaviors, all of these potential distractions emanate from the same source, which is a desire to escape discomfort. And if we don't deal with that fact first, let me tell you, I've read all the studies, virtually all the studies about time management and focus and distraction, productivity advice. None of the tips and tricks, none of the life hacks, none of the gurus' advice works unless you start first and foremost with mastering the internal trigger. That is the most important first step to becoming indistractable.
Can we use this philosophy to reverse engineer it? Like if we're using email or checking sports scores or, news or booze or football or Facebook, like you said, to avoid pain, but that at the same time is also creating pain, because we're going, at the end of the day, we're going, dang it, I didn't get that project done. I didn't get the sales calls done, right? I worked, like this morning, I worked out and I went and endured tremendous pain. It was a especially hard workout this morning, but it was because I knew that there was there was a reason for this pain, and I didn't want to deal with the pain of not
Not
feeling
doing
good
it.
today and not being focused for this
Exactly.
interview, et cetera. So can we reverse engineer that and say, okay, the reason I'm not going to check email is because I don't want to deal with the pain of not making the sales calls or doing the project or doing the deep work or writing the book, et cetera. Can we reverse engineer that?
Sure. So I think it comes, so first and foremost, it's by recognizing that discomfort. You see, in society today, we have bought into this notion that has largely been sold to us by the self-help industry, that we're supposed to be happy all the time, right? How many books do we see on the shelf with happiness in the title? How to be happy, how to be contented, how to live in perfect nirvana. Ugh, it drives me crazy because it has inculcated society to believe that feeling bad is bad. That's the problem. We think if we have the slightest bit of discomfort, if I feel a little bit uncomfortable, ooh, that's something I have to escape. The reason we don't do what we say we're going to do, right? The reason we don't work out, even though we know we will, right? We don't need any more diet books to tell us to eat right and exercise. Does anybody not know that a piece of chocolate cake is not as healthy as a healthful salad? We don't need people to tell us this.
Yeah, we don't need new research to show
We
us that.
know, we all know. Who doesn't know that, hey, if you want good relationships with your kids, with your friends, you have to be fully present with them. Does anybody not know that? If do we need another productivity book to tell us that, hey, if you want to do really well at your job, guess what? You got to do the work, especially the hard stuff that other people don't want to do. We all know what to do. And if you don't know what to do, Google it, right? For the first time in human history, it's all there. We do not have a shortage of information. What we have a shortage of is the ability to get out of our own way. That's what we're lacking today. And so this is why it's a skill of the century, because if you can do that, if you can get out of your own way and just do the things you yourself know you should do, you're unstoppable, right? That's why it's I call it a superpower. I call the book Indistractable because indistractable sounds like indestructible, right? It's a made up word. I coined the term. It's supposed to sound like that superpower. And the way we do this is by using the internal triggers, using that discomfort as rocket fuel. Our species did not evolve to be contented and happy all the time. Think about it from an evolutionary basis, okay? Let's say we had two tribes of our ancient ancestors, right? Early Homo sapiens, 200,000 years ago, on the plains of the Serengeti. One tribe of Homo sapiens meets the other tribe. One tribe is perfectly happy and contented all the time. The other tribe is us, okay? Our ancestors. Let me tell you what would have happened. our ancestors would have killed and eaten that other tribe.
Hmm.
Because to be constantly contented doesn't push you forward. We need to be perpetually perturbed to get us to invent, to create. We have to be uncomfortable in order to prod us to do more, right? We can't just meditate all our problems away. Sometimes we need to fix stuff by doing something about it. And so that's why we need to get away from this myth that discomfort is somehow something to be avoided. It's nothing more than a distraction. Because here's what people do at the first feeling of discomfort, right? They say to themselves, ooh, I don't feel like it, right? When we talk about, oh, why don't I go to the gym? I don't feel like it. Why don't I work on that project? I don't feel like it. Because we have been taught that feeling bad is bad, as opposed to if you can recognize that that internal trigger is a signal to tell you, wait a minute, if this feels bad to me, this feels bad to other people. And if I can overcome that, that's a rarefied skill. Now I can do something that other people cannot do. And if you can use that internal trigger as rocket fuel to propel you forward towards traction rather than trying to escape it with distraction, this is where you become indistractable. This is what's so powerful about learning this skill.
So I want to explore this a little bit with you because I want to make sure the listener has this clear. You're not talking about saying like we shouldn't be going through our lives saying this sucks, my job sucks, I can't wait to get to that next place. Wait till get there because then I'll be happy. Right? You can be grateful and happy in your place now, and I want to hear your take on this. Like you can be grateful and happy in your place now, and you can do all the things. You can do the meditation and the journaling and the positive psychology type stuff and be happy now, but also have a drive. You can be, you can feel those longings for that next level, but also be happy in place. And I believe, and research shows that doing that will propel you, will make you happy. Let me give you an example. Today, this morning, I've got 2 interviews. I'm interviewing you. I'm interviewing another guy later this afternoon. I'm going to be on another podcast, and I have multiple coaching calls today. And my thought this morning was like, man, this is going to be a rough day. This is going to be a long day. And I caught myself, and I was like, wait a second. Like, this is an amazing day. A year and a half ago, when you were doing this business on the side, this was the day that you dreamed about. And it shifted my mindset to like, this is amazing. Like I'm freaking stoked today.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
shifted my whole mindset, shifted me into positivity, made me more happy. And it's making me more present and excited. And this interview is going to be better for it. And so are the other ones later today. So you can, there's a balance there, right?
Yeah, so it's really about how you respond to that discomfort. And what I'm trying to convince people to stop doing is to stop looking to escape from that discomfort. Because what most people do, the source of distraction are these negative feelings. So, what most people do when they feel, oh, it's going to be another Monday, right? Another crappy day. Let me just check email for a half an hour because I don't really want to do my work, right? Let me procrastinate by watching TV as opposed to going to do that workout. Or let me, scroll Facebook at the dinner table so I don't have to listen to my whiny kids. And then they have the gall to blame the technology. Really, it's the inability to deal with discomfort. So as opposed to escaping it, we can lean into it. We can utilize it. It can be the rocket fuel to push us towards traction rather than distraction. So what you've just done, that technique is actually very validated. There's many studies that show that how we reimagine the trigger can profoundly change our behavior. I had this problem. So I'm a professional public speaker. Before COVID, I was on the road constantly giving talks, and many people are surprised to hear that when I first started in this field, I had terrible stage fright, right? Because the conversation I would have with myself before I would go on stage was, my I can feel my heart rate. And it's funny, even just telling you the story, I can feel my heartbeat now my heart is racing.
Kind of like
And
stepping on the mat for a wrestling
yeah,
match, right? We
yeah,
talked before that we
exactly.
hit record to be about you were a wrestler as well.
Yes, exactly. Like getting all nervous about about to go on stage, and oh my gosh, is the audience going to see the sweat stains underneath my arms, and am I going to forget my lines? And if I was a real public speaker, I wouldn't be so tense right now. And that was making it worse, because now it started becoming my self-image about how I see my own capabilities. And we hear this narrative all the time, right? I don't really feel like working out. Maybe I'm not an athlete. I don't really enjoy spending time with my kids. Maybe we just have a bad relationships. Why try? I don't. My kids are constantly using their devices. They're addicted, right? We make these perceptions of ourselves. We have this self image that stops us from trying. What a convenient excuse to get us to stop trying. And so instead of trying to label ourselves with an identity that hurts us more than helps us, what we have to do is to reimagine that internal trigger. And you did something very similar in saying, wait a minute, wait. Yeah, I'm so lucky to have this opportunity. So what I started doing, and I didn't invent this technique, I learned it from psychologists who have done studies on how effective this technique is reimagining the trigger. So, okay, here's the internal trigger was my heart was racing, I was getting sweaty, I was getting nervous. So, what I used to do was to tell myself how if I was a real public speaker, I shouldn't be having those feelings, right? I was looking to escape them. Well, let me just get out of here. I don't want to do this anymore. This is a bad idea. As opposed to reimagining the internal triggers, now my internal dialogue is, okay, my heart is racing right now because my brain needs more oxygen so I can perform my best, right? This is my body preparing me to deliver the best talk yet. And so by changing those narratives, by talking to myself differently, by reimagining those internal triggers, this is what I mean by being able to use those internal triggers to push us forward towards traction rather than trying to escape it with distraction.
Yeah. And it starts with the awareness. Like you feel your heart beating instead of just going, oh, I'm nervous. Let me review my lines here and stuff like my notes. It's like you go, wait a second, let me be present here in the moment and recognize what's happening, and then tell myself whatever story that I want instead of like I'm nervous is, I
Right.
don't want to blow it. Decide the story, and it starts with awareness. So let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go to the email, because I noticed this in myself, and I have to be very present and very aware of this, because what I find myself doing is I don't even know that I do this, but I've come to recognize it. I'll complete a task, and then I'll check my email inbox. I don't even know that I'm doing it. And I
I
finally get to, I'm like,
know.
where am I on my
Yes.
to-do list today? I'm not like, how do we, like, can we use that tactic as well? Maybe there's a different
Yes.
tactic, but
No.
can we
Okay.
use that tactic to reimagine the trigger if we recognize it?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the most important step is mastering the internal trigger. And there's three big pillars to mastering internal triggers. We reimagine the trigger, which we talked about earlier. We have to reimagine the task itself and reimagine our temperament. And so there's a whole host of different techniques we can use. One technique that I use almost every single day, this comes from acceptance and commitment therapy. By the way, I keep citing, these different therapies and techniques.
Stephen Hayes.
Everything in my book is backed by peer-reviewed studies. I can't stand these self-help books that are full of, oh, personal anecdotes. This worked for me. It's going to work for everyone. No. I want to see the study. So my book is full of 30 pages of citations to peer-reviewed studies. So this is backed with really good research. So one of the best techniques out there that I use almost every single day is called the 10-minute rule. Have you heard of the 10-minute rule?
Just from my research about you,
Oh,
let's
okay,
hear it.
good.
This
So
is
I'm a big
great.
proponent. So every day I write, and writing is hard work. It's not a habit. People think, oh, I want to make a habit of writing. No. You don't understand what habits are. Habits are behaviors done with little or no conscious thought. It is impossible to have a writing habit by definition, because unless you're writing gobbledygook without conscious thought, that's not a habit. It's hard work. A habit is the antithesis of deliberate practice. Deliberate practice requires us to think, to be fully present. So if you go to the gym and you're pushing forward and you're trying to get better, if you're practicing routines or moves in wrestling, whatever the case might be, you have to be fully present. You can't do that stuff out of habit. You have to be there if you want to get better. You have to be fully present. So it's the antithesis of a habit. So when I do these, when I write, It's not something I can do with little or no conscious thought. It is hard work. I've written 2 bestsellers, thousands of articles. It never gets easier. And all I want to do in the middle of while writing my articles is to go Google something real quick, or check email for a quick sec, or just do that one easy thing on my to-do list real quick, because writing is such hard work. So what do I do when I get that feeling that I want to distract myself and escape that uncomfortable sensation of, is anybody going to read this article? Is it any good? I don't really know where to go with this. Like when I feel these uncomfortable internal triggers, instead of letting myself get distracted, I tell myself I can do those things. I can get distracted in 10 minutes. This is the 10-minute rule. I can get distracted in 10 minutes. I can allow myself whatever distraction, but not right now. So you're not going to tell yourself no. You're going to tell yourself not yet. And this is incredibly effective because we know that strict abstinence oftentimes backfires. So when you tell yourself no, don't do something, whether it's smoking that cigarette, eating that piece of chocolate cake you're trying to avoid if you're on a diet, checking email when you want to work on that big project, it's like pulling on a rubber band. And if you pull it tighter, 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 eventually you can't pull it anymore. You let go. The rubber band doesn't go back where it started. No, it ricochets across the room. And that's what happens when we tell ourselves no. That many times abstinence, we've seen this with addictions, abstinence oftentimes does not work. And it doesn't work particularly with the kind of things that are around us at all times. We can't escape food. We can't escape technology. It's around us all the time. So abstinence works with some things, but not others. Instead of telling yourself no, what you want to do is to tell yourself not yet. So when I am writing and all I want to do is Google something or check email, I set an alarm for 10 minutes. I put my phone down, and now I have a choice to make. I can either surf the urge. Surf the urge acknowledges that that these emotions are like waves. They crest and then they subside. And so if we can just surf these urges like a surfer on a surfboard, 9 times out of 10, by the time that the alarm rings, we won't feel that urge anymore. But in the moment, it feels like we're always going to want that thing really, really bad. But if we just give it a few minutes, those urges crest and then go away. And so that's what this 10-minute rule is all about. Just sitting there for a few minutes, talking to yourself with self-compassion. I teach you exactly how to do this in the book. It's an incredibly effective technique. So that's just one of dozens of different arrows in our quiver, so to speak, that we can utilize whenever we feel these uncomfortable internal triggers bubbling up. But there are many others we can use. But again, all this falls under the rubric of step number 1, which is mastering internal triggers. We also have to do step 2, 3, and 4. Step number 2 is making time for traction. So most people out there use this horrible productivity technique called running your life on a to-do list. Running your life on a to-do list is one of the worst things you can do for your personal productivity. Now, I'm not against keeping a to-do list. Let me be very clear. Getting things out of your brain and putting them on a to-do list is a wonderful thing to do. What I am against is people waking up in the morning and saying, "Ooh, what should I do with my life? What should I do with my time? Let me look at my to-do list." If you look at your to-do list before you look at your calendar, you've already lost. And there are many, many reasons why to-do lists hurt your productivity that we can go into and what to do instead if we have time. So step number 2 is making time for traction. Very few people turn their values into time. We talk a good game, but when you look at people's calendar, they have tons of white space, right? Most people have nothing on their calendars, maybe a meeting, a dentist appointment, but how can you call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from? If you look at your calendar and there's very little on it, or more to the point, if you haven't planned every minute of your day, how can you say something is a distraction? Everything's a distraction unless you decide in advance how you want to spend your time. You can't call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. So I teach you exactly how to do that. And it sounds onerous. It sounds like a lot of work. It's not. It's 15 minutes a week. Anyone can do it. And it has been proven to be one of the most effective techniques. Literally thousands of studies have shown how effective this one amazingly simple technique is. Step number 3 is to hack back the external triggers. So part of our problem with email is that we constantly get all these pings and dings. Well, here's the thing. We can hack back. I can teach you how to reduce the time you spend on email by up to 90% by understanding the deeper psychology around why we keep checking email so compulsively. And then finally, the last step is to prevent distraction with pacts, which is where we erect a firewall, the last line of defense, to prevent us from getting distracted. So it's not that there's a magic bullet. People always want, oh, give me the life hack. Give me the one thing I can do. People, don't be lazy. You've got to use all 4 techniques. And if you do this, if you use all 4 techniques in concert, and I'm telling you, anybody can do this within an hour and a half of learning these techniques in the book, anyone can become indistractable. It will change your life as it has mine.
And for the listener, we're going to have all 4 of those and everything else in the action plan. Just go to jimharshawjr.com/action, as always, to get the notes from this. Nir, let's talk about failure. Like, so many of us have failed at trying to be indistractable, right? And maybe we've not put in the effort or read your book or read the research or, learned the techniques or applied them in the way that we should. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, for those who have like failed over and over for years at creating consistency and showing up as their best self and executing at their highest level that they know is possible. They failed and they keep telling themselves the story that I can't do it. See, there I go again. What's your take on failure as it's in its role in Indistractable?
It's almost as if you read my diary. Look, I wrote this book for me. You know why it took me 5 years to write Indistractable? Because I kept getting distracted. And it wasn't until I learned these methodologies that, again, I didn't do the original research here. I'm standing on the shoulder of giants. I'm giving you 30 pages of citations to peer-reviewed studies. I combed the stacks of study after study to bring you the very most important 4 strategies that are science-backed to help you become indistractable. And I did this for myself. If other people benefit, that's great. I mean, the book has sold over 500,000 copies. It's wonderful. I'm so glad it's been helpful. But let me tell you, the most important person I wrote this for was me, because I was crazy distracted. I was clinically obese. I was so easily distracted. I talk about this anecdote in the book, the story of when I was with my daughter. And I had this beautiful afternoon planned with my daughter, and I was checking my cell phone as opposed to being fully present with her. And that's when I said enough is enough, right? I have to figure out my relationship with distraction. So that's what propelled me down this journey to do this 5 years of research. And so here's the thing. Being indistractable does not mean you never get distracted. Okay, I made up the term, so I can define it any way I wish. Being indistractable means you strive to live with personal integrity. It means you are as honest with yourself as you are with other people, right? How many of us know that it's a terrible thing to lie to people? None of us want to be liars. People are generally, they strive to be honest with other people. And yet we lie to ourselves all the time. Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to work out today and eat right. No, I didn't. I'm definitely going to be fully present with the people I love. No, I wasn't. I'm definitely going to work on that big project I've been putting off. I can wait till tomorrow. And so I was lying to myself every single day. But here's the difference. A distractible person keeps getting distracted by the same things again and again and again and doesn't do anything about it. Paulo Coelho has a wonderful quote. He said, "A mistake repeated more than once is a decision." A mistake repeated more than once is a decision. An indistractable person realizes, okay, I see what you did there, distraction. You got me once, but you're not going to get me the second time. You know why? Because every distraction only has 3 potential sources: an internal trigger, an external trigger, or a planning problem. That's it. There's only 3 reasons for any distraction. It's always one of those 3 causes. So I'm going to do something about it now to prevent it happening again in the future.
Nir, can you tell us about a time when you failed? Right, we look at somebody like you who Stanford MBA,
How much time you
and
got?
you've right. I mean, you've sold 2 companies and invested in all these amazing companies that have gone on to success. You've written these best-selling books. Everything from the outside looking in, it looks like it was easy for you. But was there failure? Is there a moment in time when you can take us back to when you failed and you felt that self-doubt, that hopelessness that comes from failure, and how you moved through that?
Like we used to say it when I went to a Stanford business school, they told us that people who go to Stanford are like ducks, right? On the surface, it looks like a duck. On the water is peaceful and relaxed and having a good time. But if you go below the surface, you'll see that they're paddling like crazy, right? Their little legs are paddling as fast as they possibly can. And that's what most successful people are doing, right? Like you only see the highlights. You don't see the failures. You don't see the fact that when I started my second company, it was a very rocky experience. It was very, very hard work. We kept having these highs and lows. We raised $5 million, and then we would have an amazing quarter, and then we would have a terrible quarter, and our key employee left, and I got shingles because I was so stressed that my immune system was shot. I gained 20 pounds. I just had a really, really rough time during that startup. Thankfully, we had an exit and things worked out okay. But it was a really, really, really hard time, and it was full of failures. I mean, every day it was like two steps forward, one step back, and so that's part of the process. I mean, I can't tell you how many articles I published, and I said, "Oh, this is a great post," and I've spent countless hours on it, and I refine it and I tweak it, and then I hit publish, and crickets, right? Nobody reads it. It makes no impact whatsoever. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I've had business failures. I've had personal failures. I used to be clinically obese. My life is full of these failures, and many of these failures, of course, I talk about in the book. As I mentioned, I wrote Indistractable for me more than anyone else, and so I talk about many of these failures that I overcame because one of my life mantras is consistency over intensity, right? Consistency over intensity. That to have the good things that we desire in life, it's not about that intensity. That intensity for some things is good in the short term, but of course, intensity can only last so long because we burn out. So people misplace when to use intensity and when to use consistency, right? It's much more important if you want to get in physical shape. Don't be the kind of person who makes a New Year's resolution and goes to the gym for 2 weeks, right? Be the kind of person who does a little bit every day for years, right? That's how I lost the weight. That's how I got into shape for the first time in my life at age 43. I'm in the best shape of my life because of consistency over intensity. The reason I have a better relationship with my wife after 20 years of marriage, it's not because I said, honey, we need to fall in love this weekend, right? I know we've had a really rocky relationship, but let's get back together now. That doesn't work that way. It's about consistently showing up, making time for each other, having good experiences together, right? Having those date days, having time on our calendar reserved for each other, picking up the slack around the house so that I can take my fair share of the responsibilities. This is a failure in the book that I talk about how my wife turned to me one day and, told me about how, hey, why don't you do your share around the house? There's so much to do. And many men and women listening to me right now have had this argument. I know this for a fact because the research shows that even in the year 2021, women take on a disproportionate share of household responsibilities, right? As much as we guys like to say, oh, yeah, sure, we pull our weight. We don't, statistically speaking. And I would always tell my wife, if you need me to do something around the house, just tell me. Just tell me, I'll do it. And what I didn't realize was that by me saying that, I was asking her to take on yet another job. Now I needed her to be my babysitter, essentially. And so it wasn't until we utilized the practices I talk about in the book around what's called schedule syncing that our life was changed. I mean, that was a personal failure that I really did fail my wife, and I didn't even realize I was failing her. And today I can proudly say that we have a better relationship than ever because we've instituted these practices in our life.
Nir, there's so much more that we can cover, so much more in the book, so much more in the research that you've covered. Where can people continue to learn about you? Where can they find the book, find your website, follow you on social media, et cetera?
Sure. So the book is called Indistractable: How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life, and it's available wherever books are sold. And if you go to my website, nirandfar.com, Nir is spelled like my first name, N-I-R and far.com. So that's nirandfar.com. There's actually an 80-page workbook that we couldn't fit into the final version of the book, and it's totally yours for free. It's complimentary, and it'll start you on your path to becoming indistractable. Whether you buy the book or not, it's there for you for free. And that's all available at my blog, nirandfar.com.
Excellent. Thanks so much for making time to come on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
If you like this video, hit the like button below. But also, what was helpful? What wasn't helpful? What questions do you have? I'll reply to every comment below. And if you actually want to get all of the notes, all of the quotes, all of the links, all of the action items from this entire episode, go to jimharshawjr.com/action and you can download the free PDF action plan. It'll give you all the notes, quotes, links, everything from the entire episode. You'll also get access to all of the action plans from all of my episodes of the Success Through Failure podcast. And if you want to learn how you can actually apply this learning to your life, figure out how you can start getting results now, you can actually sign up for a free one-time coaching call with me. Just go to jimharshawjr.com/apply. That's jimharshawjr.com/apply. It's a very quick, short application process. Find a time on my calendar, fill out the questionnaire, and you and I will have a conversation about how you can start getting results in your life by applying what you've learned. I look forward to talking to you.